people often, I find in small businesses, they have ambiguity, just as you said. It's not clear. It's, oh, well, and the mentality is like, we're a family, like hunky dory. We all help
Yeah.
each other out. Everybody helps and everybody does everything. So like, it's all good. Everything's going to get solved.
Yeah.
Guess what, folks? You're not a family.
No.
That's the wrong way to think about it. People come to
Agreed.
work for a paycheck.
Yeah.
If they enjoy their coworkers and they have a good time, then they'll
Great.
be happier and they'll be
Yeah.
better. But it's not a family.
Yeah.
If you stop paying them, they will stop showing up.
They will stop being part of the family.
Just that simple. And so therefore, you've got to put the roles, you've got to specify the roles.
Growth can sometimes be a hard thing to get your hands around. So today, what I want to do is I want to talk about a structure for identifying what's keeping you from growing. And for this discussion, I have Ryan Drake Lee, founder and president at RDL Consulting, to walk us through how we should be thinking about operational growth. Welcome to the show, Ryan.
Thanks for having me, Lee. I really appreciate it. Good to be with you.
Yeah, I think this will be fun. Before we get into that discussion, tell everybody a little bit about your background. I know you have a pretty cool background in consulting. You've had your hands in hundreds of businesses of all sizes. So really want to hear about that.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for that. So, my name is Ryan. I am a strategy and operations and business economics expert. I have honed my skills in my craft over a 20-year career in corporate strategy roles. I started my career actually at McKinsey & Company, a global strategy management firm. And there I served a variety of clients, everything spanning from telecommunications operators when they were launching the first triple play bundles where you bundled TV, phone, and internet, right, for a single price. That seems ubiquitous in the market now, all the way up to helping, Fortune 50 oil and gas companies on their safety and operational risk culture through organizational design and development, concepts and theories.
Mm-hmm.
Along my career, I've also spent time as a volunteer consultant working for a nonprofit organization where I spent a year in South Africa supporting smallholder farmers and trying to help their businesses grow. So my business problem-solving experience, right, and prowess comes from looking at, micro businesses in developing economies in the countryside, which are mostly agricultural or agribusiness based, all the way up to working for, Fortune 50 industrial conglomerates. And I also spent about 3 years at Google in a strategy and operations role in the mid-market ads function. So that's the 800-pound gorilla core revenue producing function at Google. My team was developing go-to-market strategies for the 2,000 plus odd sellers that managed about $1 billion in revenue per week. When I was there, it's probably easily up to $2 billion per week now. That's kind of insane just to think about how much revenue those few people are touching. Mm-hmm. But that was a very cross-functional role that dealt with technology development, with software engineers in a global landscape, meaning that all of the work and campaigns and programs that my team led had to be localized, into 30 plus languages, receive legal reviews from the seniors, senior higher up folks. So my experience, right, once again, just kind of giving you my background, right, why should you care about what Ryan Drake Lee has to say, I think is because, once again, I've got that very broad business problem solving experience, right? Once again, from small mom and pop shops, right, all the way up to large, complex, multinational organizations with intangible technology, intangible intellectual property. So, quite frankly, I'm a business nerd. I love this stuff, right? I love thinking about how, businesses click, how they make money, how they work, how they grow. And then, I kind of refine that down into a very kind of precise operational focus. I am, very much an observer of how things actually work, right? Like, what does it take to actually produce the widget or produce the service and do that in a repeatable way that's sustainable? And so whether that's sustainable from a human energy standpoint, right, or, a materials consumption and, energy climate change standpoint. So that's who I am, and happy to be talking with you today.
Yeah, that's awesome. Excited about this conversation. I'm curious, your work with the nonprofit, since that came later, how difficult was it to translate your knowledge to the farmer from the corporate setting?
Yeah. Well, it's a great question because in business, right, there are key functions that exist no matter how big or small an organization
Hmm.
is, right? And those things can be, supply chain related if it's a physical product. So the farmers that I worked with were chicken farmers, banana
Yep.
farmers, as well as coffee farmers. And so, one applications, chicken farmers, these guys were selling live chickens for consumption, right? For eating.
Hmm.
And so, I learned about how you buy day old baby chicks, and they literally are a day old. They come in, cardboard boxes that look
Yep.
like the vegetable trays that you get from Costco when get all your stuff piled into there and you carry it to your car. And that's just got maybe 50 baby chicks in them.
Yeah.
And, but that has a process to it, right? At some point, those
Hmm.
chickens are going to show up on the back of a truck in a set of 10 boxes with 50 each. And now you have 500 chicks.
Hmm.
What are you going to do with them? You're in the heat, you're in the sun. Someone's got to be there at the ready, pick them up, carry them to the chicken houses,
Yep.
open up the boxes, spread them out, and do something thereafter, right? And you've
Yep.
got to have those things kind of organized and timed, or chicks die, right?
Yeah.
You lose product. So there's process involved. So that's just, kind of an idea about supply chain and product
Hmm.
management and ops. But same thing in the same environment, then once you are raising your chickens, you've got to inoculate them against
Hmm.
diseases. So you've got a process to make sure they're getting fed, they're getting
Hmm.
watered, they're getting inoculated. And then eventually, when they're mature and they're ready for sale, that's actually only 5 weeks
Hmm.
for live chickens. So you go from having a day old chicken,
Yep.
5 weeks later, 35 days, you should have chickens for sale. And I mentioned the 35 days and the 5 weeks because that should be built into your operational cycle and how
Right.
you're utilizing the chicken houses and the space that you have.
Hmm.
So, and then when you get to that point, I was going to touch on now you've got marketing and sales. How
Hmm.
do you sell these chickens? Do people come to your farm, to your farm gate and buy them on the spot in cash? Do they buy them with a mobile phone? Or do you drive
Hmm.
them to a marketplace? If you're going to drive them to a marketplace, how are you getting them?
Yeah.
Which truck are you using? Which van
Are
are
you?
you using? How many bikes are you using? Are you walking them
That's
there?
right. Yep.
Right. So,
Yeah.
it's supply chain again, but it's details that matter. And so people, process, details, right? There are those elements that are included in marketing activities. Once you get into, bigger, more complex operations and financing activities, right?
Hmm.
What your working capital is, what's your cash cycle? How long is it from when you buy products,
Hmm.
inputs until you can, produce an output and get paid?
Hmm.
Right? And that's something called working capital. And so, my thinking is that the same kind of activities have to happen in all businesses, small or large,
Yeah.
but they happen at different scale.
Right.
And so you've got to develop process that's repeatable, that's manageable, that you can quality control at all stages. And so, quite frankly, I think you can just break down processes that happen in large organizations, simplify them, and apply them. And
Yes.
that's where, quite frankly, the big differences come into resource availability, support, right? I
Hmm.
think what people who spend a lot of their careers or their working time in large organizations, may not realize is that all the support people, all the back end stuff, the fact that you call a help desk when you have computer problem, the fact that
Hmm.
you email the quote unquote marketing person when you've got a marketing question, right? There's all these people that you can talk to get information from and to help solve your issue. In a smaller organization, those resources just don't exist.
That's
So
right.
you've got to go figure that out yourself. If you have a
Well,
question and it's like, oh, well, normally you would call marketing. Well, this time it might mean you call your friends who work in marketing to
yeah.
see if they've got a perspective, or you
Right.
do some research online and you read some things, or you talk to, folks in the supply chain who have faced this problem in the past and you get information from them.
Yeah.
So that's what it means to be entrepreneurial. It means to
That's
be able
right.
to seek out information from different channels, from different sources, to be able to assess and evaluate that information to validate whether or not it's good, it's accurate, it's
Hmm.
useful, it's applicable to your scenario, your situation. So, quite frankly, it's a lot of the same functions, that are just a kind of, you have a different approach to how you solve them, but it's the
Right.
same kind of core issues that you're solving.
Yeah, that's awesome. And all of this is just triggering lots of memories in my mind, because I don't know if you know this, but I don't know if I mentioned this before, but this is kind of where we have some overlap in our background, because I did some work with a nonprofit for a few years, traveling to Haiti and Honduras, working with, exactly everything you just laid out, exactly the same way. We work with farmers. We work with people who are making their own peanut butter and selling it on the street, making what they call pomquettes, like little biscuits.
Yep.
And so for me, it was taking what I knew that worked in the developed world and distilling it down to principles that could be translated literally, into a different language, into a different, environment.
Right.
But talking about the chicken farmer, we had a chicken farmer in Haiti, which was it was so surreal, because they had all the chicks in this one big pen, and it was the first time I had ever really been around that many chicks at one time, where they were just chirping really, really
Right.
lightly. It was like a pillow, effect. It was really cool. And then there was this chicken farmer in Honduras that they had land up on a mountain, so we went up there. They had other animals too, but chickens were their main product.
Okay.
And so we were able to be there when they were harvesting some of them. But that process was really interesting. And they're doing it out overlooking a mountain range, which is just beautiful. Like, people would pay
Yeah.
tens of thousands of dollars to have this view. And here, this is where they live. But to the whole process thing, like their customers were some of the restaurant owners they knew in town, and they would have a cycle of chickens that came through, and they would have those
Right.
available, and those restaurant owners would buy them fresh and use them. So that's triggering a lot of things in my mind, that from years past, that was so much fun to take what and use in your day to day with American style mid-market companies for me, to these sort of rudimentary upstart, like talking about resources, is not, you don't call marketing, you don't even really call a friend, you hopefully when you show up that day, the electricity's on, right?
Well, yeah, you've got a different set of
You got
challenges,
a whole
which are
different set of problems
unreliable
and everything.
utilities, right? Where you
That's
have to
right.
have things like, barrels of water around if the water doesn't turn
Right.
on, and you've got to know, two guys who have water trucks, because if the water's out for a serious
That's
number
right.
of days, you can get in a truckload of water. So it's just
It's
a
it's a
different set
whole
of
Yeah, it's
solutions
a
and
whole other
tools you
set
have
of
to use.
ingenuity that's required just to show up to work every day. I mean,
That's
you can
right.
look at all countries around the world like this, and this is how they survive every day. But that was kind of a nice to hear you say all that, because I totally resonate with that whole train of thought. It was difficult for me at first to translate, but as the more I did it, it became more principle based, where it's like, okay, well, what are they doing here? What they're doing here does, it requires this principle. And so I just break it down from what I would have, told a company in the US.
Right.
So that's great. I mean, that's amazing background. You've got such a breadth of experience and knowledge. And I think that whole first part of the conversation is super important, because it shows your thinking that it is very much based on principles. You can go into any company and break it down, break problems down, and find solutions. So, to the nature of our conversation today, we're talking about operational growth. And, as I mentioned in the intro, a lot of companies and founders, CEOs, they're dealing with issues that are keeping them from growth. And sometimes they may not even know what those issues are. So what you're going to do now is take us through sort of a framework of auditing. So it's like an auditing mentality to help us figure out what are those issues that we can identify that are keeping us from growth, and we can start working through solving those. So I'm going to kind of turn it over to you and let you take us through this, and I'll just pipe in wherever necessary.
Excellent. That sounds great, Lee. So, when I work with lower mid-market clients, oftentimes folks come to me with a challenge around, either they're wanting to grow or they want to make more money, right? It's profitability. Now, that is, let's say, the external facing presentation of the challenge, right? That's like, when you've got a cold sore on your mouth, right?
That's the
You
symptom.
don't know, that's a symptom, right? You don't know
Yep.
exactly what's causing that, right? And so You may be vitamin C deficient, you may be dehydrated, you may be another mineral, deficient, but you've got to go figure that out. So I kind of take a similar approach to business challenges where owners say, hey, I'm not making enough money. I want to be more profitable. I should be able to be making X, right? Or we haven't really been growing. My revenue has been more or less flat for the past 18, 12, 6 months. So, I want to grow. How do I do that? Generally, what I start with is what I call an owner's operating model audit, right? I want to understand, and quite frankly, just one step aside, right? The problem-solving approach is first data gathering, right? So you think you put that under the hat of, I need to go gather data to figure out what's the status of things. How are things working today? And in a small business, as we already touched on, you don't have these big departments with lots of resources and a lot of process, that's formalized and established. And so it's kind of easier to narrow in on things, or you can go to a department head and say, tell me everything that's going on, right? So we have to come at this from a very ground level, practical approach. And that starts with understanding roles and responsibilities, right, throughout different functions of the business. So let me give you an example. I was working with a client, right? I'm going to use a super simple one, which was a coffee shop, right? This was a coffee shop. Somebody bought a coffee shop in the pandemic. They had a full-time job, if you will, as an attorney at a tech company, and they bought a coffee shop in the pandemic. Didn't have a lot of experience operating and running a coffee shop, and felt like profitability was, they were not profitable. They weren't making money on a month-over-month basis, and wanted to change things. So we thought that the hypothesis going in was my pricing is wrong, or my staffing level is wrong. I'm paying too much on labor, right? So when you've got a profitability challenge, you look at your P&L and you're like, what are the big line items, right? If the big line items are taking up a large percentage of my revenue, right, or my total cost, I must attack that one. That must be the issue. Now, that's not automatically wrong, but you want to double click into that a lot more. So continue with the example, we start by understanding what are all the roles that exist in the coffee shop. You've got baristas, you've got, clerks at the front who are taking payment and taking orders. You might have a food prep person in the back. Maybe there's a manager. Maybe there's not a manager. And you've just got all doers, and it's not clear, right, who makes tough decisions when there's conflict or when there's friction. Right. So we first want to go and map out what are the roles, right? And what are they supposed to be doing? Then what we also do is we want to map out what's the process from zero to end product delivered to customer and customers happy. And the reason I say that it starts at like zero is because it's not when a customer walks in the coffee shop, right? Because when they walk in the coffee shop, you have to already have coffee, already have milk, already have staff, already have napkins and cups and holders and sugar. So there's a bunch of stuff that happens before a customer even comes in the door. And we need to understand, how does all that stuff work? Who's responsible for ordering, right? That's procurement, is a big word for corporate, scenarios, but in small cases, just who's buying stuff, right? When are they buying stuff, right? Who has authority to use the credit card and buy and put stuff on there? So, what I mean by this is, or what I'm going with this is that if you're the owner, you might have a manager and you've delegated that all to the manager. But when was the last time you looked at the most recent order and you scrutinized it to the level of how much of things are we throwing away, right? So stuff comes in the door and I pay money for it. And then if I have finished goods, they go out the door and I get revenue for it. Or I have unfinished goods, or I have unsold items, or I have things that spoiled, or I have mistake orders that happen and they have to go in the garbage. Yeah. So you want to look at what are your spoilage rate or your wastage rate. And you also just want to understand, after people order things, right, how does it get inventoried? How does it get stored? Because some of your problem could be that it's an accounting issue. It's a paper issue, meaning that you order things, they either don't get entered right, accurately into the system. Yeah. And so what you're looking at is a report that comes out of your POS system, but it's got all these holes in it. And so it's not capturing activities that are happening. And so you can't see it on the back end of the P&L where your net operating margin is, right?
But it sounds like through all this, you're just asking the right, good questions of your business, right?
So that's right. But, the challenge is for folks who've seen a lot of different businesses in a lot of different scenarios, right, in a variety of markets and environments,
Hmm.
those questions of what to ask come naturally. They come
Yeah.
intuitively, right? They
There's
come
a lot more
intuitively
patterns there.
to a guy like me because,
Yeah.
I'm looking for pattern recognition, right?
That's
I'm
right. Yeah.
looking for, you know, I'm looking for what's going on. I kind of know to ask. I know I need to ask about this role. I need to
Yeah,
ask
that's
about
right.
this function. I need to ask about procurement. I need to ask about working capital. I need to
Hmm.
ask about who opens up and closes at the end of the day. Who does the cash runs if you have cash runs and walks it to the bank, right? Because these are all places where leakages can happen.
Hmm.
And so as an owner, you may not be aware. If you're relatively new, you may not be aware. Or you could have established a process up front with somebody you hired 2 years ago and they're just not following it anymore. And so you're assuming that things are happening according to XYZ, but they're not in reality.
Hmm.
So back to as where we started, which is a process map and a process audit.
Hmm.
And that has to start from whatever zero is and to whatever the finish line is, where product goes out the door and gets paid for, or where service gets completed and gets paid for.
Yeah.
And once
I
again,
like that idea of
and
a map, like a
and
visual map. That makes sense. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, and you may even want to diagram out a visual map, right?
Yeah.
And you can start with pencil and paper, right?
I
Don't
like that.
overcomplicate things and try to use AutoCAD. And there's 10,000 tools on the
Yeah. Yeah.
internet to, blah, 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 download an app, click through stuff. Pen and
Yeah.
paper works
Just
fine.
draw it out. Yeah.
Just draw it out, right? So you want to understand what's that process, and then who are the people and what are their responsibilities within each of those,
Hmm.
and are they doing what they're supposed to be doing, right? Basic questions like that, because the next step is after you've kind of had those conversations with the owner and you've got the owner view on how things are supposed to work or how they established them, months ago or years ago. Now you want to go talk to the actual people doing the work. You want to talk to the employees, talk to the frontline employees and the managers, and
Yeah.
ask them, right? This always goes back to the classic, hey, I'm going to show my age here. I'm in my 40s. I don't care. You
Yeah.
can know that, right? The Office Space movie with the
Yeah.
consultants who go in and talk to the guys and say, tell me, what is it that you actually do all
What
day?
is it that you do here? Yeah.
Right? Well, tell me what you do here. And then, whatever, there's comedy scenes that come after that. But that's the point, is you're trying to understand how do they spend their time, if they're spending it effectively.
Hmm.
And remember, it's not always to kind of hit people over with the head with, oh, you're wrong. It's
Hmm.
more like you might be doing something better and faster
Yeah.
because, hey, by the way, you were doing this for a year and you're like, this is a faster way to
Yeah.
do it, so I just do it like this. But maybe that didn't get communicated to the person who runs the afternoon shift.
Yeah. So it's like fact finding.
You come in the morning and you figured out a way to do it and you do it, and then the person comes in at 3 o'clock on shift change and they do it a completely different way and they screw it up, and every
Yeah.
morning you have to fix what they did,
Yeah.
and it's not getting, and then maybe the manager doesn't feel empowered to correct employee one versus employee two and have what is a difficult conversation, because you've got people who are doing things differently and now you need to get on the same page. So somebody's going to have to say some feedback. Somebody's going to have to say, okay, great, I've heard from everybody and now we're going to do this.
Hmm.
Right? If you don't have a manager who's empowered to have that conversation and who has the right tools and who knows the boundaries of what they can change, what they can't change, what the
Hmm.
implications are of the changes, are there cost implications, are there scheduling implications, are there legal implications, are there
Hmm.
customer service implications, are there downstream, if you do it this way and it's not ready by 5 o'clock, well then XYZ, the person who comes after you doesn't show up after 5 o'clock. So that means it really kicks it to the following day.
Yeah.
So then you've got 3 hours of dead time or something at the end of your day
Yeah.
when things could be happening, but they're not happening.
Right.
So once again, I've just ran through kind of random examples, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Around mapping out the process, committing it to paper, and then talking to the people and seeing if the people's actions map the process as intended.
Hmm.
That applies everywhere. I'll give you another example. When I was at McKinsey and Company, I worked for Walmart on a retail operations study to optimize their vision centers and their pharmacies. Okay. Vision centers and pharmacies are heavily regulated businesses, right? With healthcare delivery, through optometrists and ophthalmologists, and then through, pharmacists and pharmacy techs. Pharmacists are the ones who have to review the prescription and do what's called adjudicating the prescription, ensuring that it's accurate, it fits with the insurance, so they're going to get paid, it's relevant to the patient's profile, and all the information, all the P2 information, the PII, the personally identifiable information, name, address, phone number, social security number, right, and insurance membership number are accurate. Then they put that downstream and they give it to a tech who's then going to go fill the bottles, from the big bottle to the little bottle. Once again, I'm just giving really random examples.
All these steps are important. I mean, everything they're doing is important, but that's where you can find issues.
Right? Because so what I'm going with this is I optimize pharmacy operations for Walmart, which is a 3,000 plus network of pharmacies, but every state has different laws. So there's different constraints that you have to work with. So first, it involved me spending probably about a month worth of human time, right? Person hours, man hours, standing in pharmacies, observing, watching people do their job. Right? But I don't even know what to observe at first. So day one is, let me just watch and figure out what's going on, and let me ask some questions. Now I've got a day under my belt of watching this. Let me create a template or some kind of map where I can start counting, tabulating, right? Looking for deviation between what's supposed to happen, quite frankly, what happened yesterday and what's happening today. So you start with a blank sheet of paper, you get some information, then you go create a template for, now you know what you're looking for. Now you go and you count, or you observe, and you observe specifically what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Then you go and you do analysis. You find patterns.
Okay.
You set hypotheses. You say, look, I think it should be happening like this. Now let me go and test and see if it's supposed to happen if it is happening like that. And let me see if it's happening like that in Mississippi and Tennessee and Minnesota and Oregon and Connecticut. Oh, it's happening in different places. It's different in different places.
You're going to find a lot of interesting stuff coming out of that. Yeah.
What's going on? Is the training the same? Is the communication the same? Is the role and responsibility the same? Is the job description the same? Is the, all of it. So that's just an example on pharmacies, right? On vision centers, it was a similar thing. So I say all that once again to give an example of whether it's a 3,000 plus location network chain, you're going to start by doing observations on the ground in a single store. And then you're going to develop a hypothesis of what's going on and start to compare that to what should be going on, or what the plan was supposed to be. Then you're going to go and look for deviations by geography and by location, and try to find all the drivers that could be driving these variations. Is this tenure of the employees? Hey, if you get folks, anybody less than 5 years, they just don't have the chops yet. There's high turnover. It just happens the way it happens. But you notice that after someone's been there for 5 years, they get in the groove, they understand the constraints, they work within the limits, and things start to level out. I don't know. It's just a hypothesis, right? So once again, I'm bringing this, I'm describing all this, right, as an example of how you do it for lower middle market companies. But the same approach and problem-solving methodology applies whether you're big or small.
Yeah.
Right? When you get big, the complexities now start to be consistency, right? And manageability, meaning if I'm the owner and I'm really adamant about things being a certain way, I can control one store. I got to show up every day and do it, but I can probably even control 3 or 5 stores, because I can split my time going to different stores and checking in with people and being present and giving them support and reiterating and repeating and ensuring that it goes the way it's supposed to. Once I've got 25 stores, 50 stores, 100 stores, and I can't be in 100 stores, even in a year, I can't touch 100 stores. Well, then now you need process, and that process has to have incentives and kind of penalties on it, because, hey, if you're not there to observe, then people are going to do what they do, and people are people. They're going to find the way to get the least amount done, right, and get the most amount of credit. So you're going to have leakages. So you've got to have systems, systems.
It sounds like to me the key here is if it's not the owner operator that is doing this inquiry, because sometimes it won't be, but I think for a lot of people listening, it will be the founder, CEO. It's about being curious and being objectively curious almost. It's like looking for patterns So am I right in saying that? Because if they don't hire someone like you that just gets it, like, I mean, you have all the patterns built in, like you just come with the right questions. If they're searching to find the right questions, is that really how they should be, the thinking should be when they go about trying to find issues? Because I think that they probably can't launch off into this big study of their company. They probably have to take one, piece at a time. And you mentioned role descriptions. It triggered in my mind. I've seen a lot of companies that have a lot of issues with people because of role ambiguity, where
Yes.
it's not clear what I do, when I do it, who I'm connected to, and all this stuff. So just that one specific thing could take up a lot of time to go in and
Hugely important.
find
You've hit
answers.
the nail on the head, right? Roles and responsibilities are the most basic thing. I like to use the
Okay,
sports
so that'd be a
analogy.
great place to start. Yeah.
Yes, I like to use the sports analogies with folks because it's relevant and a lot of at least Americans get it, right? It's
Mhm.
like, if you're playing football, right? There's a quarterback, right?
Yeah.
Only the quarterback can throw the ball. If
Right.
somebody else tries to throw the ball, guess what? There's a flag, it's a penalty.
Yeah.
Right. And furthermore, that's an extreme, but
Sure.
and you run plays, right? And when you run a play, people have to run their play. They have to
Hmm.
play their role. That's your
Run the
role.
route.
You have
Yeah.
your role, you have the responsibility. You got to block this person. This person has to get open. You got to throw the ball to them.
That's
We
right.
could use any sports analogy that is a team sport.
Yeah.
Okay. Because people have to play their roles. In soccer, if the striker is running back to play defense, when you finally do win the ball in defensive position and then you kick it forward, the striker's not there, you go nowhere,
That's right.
right? You got to stay in your position and play your role. So people often, I find in small businesses, they have ambiguity, just as you said. It's not clear. It's, oh, well, and the mentality is like, we're a family, like hunky dory. We all help
Yeah.
each other out. Everybody helps and everybody does everything. So like, it's all good. Everything's going to get solved.
Yeah.
Guess what, folks? You're not a family.
No.
That's the wrong way to think about it. People come to
Agreed.
work for a paycheck.
Yeah.
If they enjoy their coworkers and they have a good time, then they'll
Great.
be happier and they'll be
Yeah.
better. But it's not a family.
Yeah.
If you stop paying them, they will stop showing up.
They will stop being part of the family.
Just that simple. And so therefore, you've got to put the roles, you've got to specify the roles. And actually, people are dying for that specificity.
Yes.
Because
it's empowering.
They want to know what good looks like is one.
Yep.
So if you want to be clear on this is what good looks like, if you do this list of things in this ways or in these orders, you will be good by me in my eyes. And oh, by the way, here's the things that are kind of not negotiable. And then here's the things that maybe are negotiable. But you need to know that clearly. And why is that important? Because it allows work to be handed off between team members and it sets expectations.
Yeah.
Right. If the expectation is when a customer comes, if there's 4 people on the shop floor and when a customer comes in, the expectation is everybody's going to help them. Guess what? Either no one's going to help them or everybody is at the same time and the customer's not going to like it.
Yeah.
Because now they're bombarded. Hi, how you doing? Welcome in. Hi, how you doing? Welcome in. Oh, well, when I was halfway in the store, somebody over here said, hi, help them. Now I'm in the back of the store and somebody came from hi, how you doing? Welcome in. It's like, dude, let me shop, right? Let me shop, right?
Why don't you guys get on the same page?
So that's just an extreme example, but that's what people want. They want clarity of roles. It sets expectations for who's doing what when. It also helps with, quite frankly, when things go wrong, because when things go wrong, you can go to where did they go wrong? Oh, they went wrong in step 5 of 17. Okay, who's the lead for steps 1 through 6? Let's go talk to the person who's on lead for steps 1 through 6 because it went wrong in step 5. Now we can figure out what happened. Yeah. Oh, I was tired today. I'm sorry I made a mistake. Or, oh, I didn't even know we were supposed to do it that way. Or, yeah, you know what? Step 5 is really dumb because it really wastes my time on step 6. So I always skip step 5.
Yeah.
And they don't even know the implication that the person who's responsible for step 12 is like, I keep getting this incomplete thing and I have to work with it. Right. Why is it always like this?
It's amazing how many times I've seen that play out in companies where, the right hand doesn't really know what the left hand's doing. And just fixing a few things could really have a lot of impact. If I'm recapping here, here's the way I would say it is you want to look at your operations, map out the process. You want to ask, intelligent, smart questions, like curious type of questions. You're gathering data, looking for insights. You're looking for patterns that will usually, if you know your business pretty well, are going to stick out pretty quick. And then you want to analyze that data, whether it's actual spreadsheet data or, qualitative data.
Yeah, it could just be a set of quotes and and statements that your
Yeah,
team
or
made.
just talking to your team, because that's going to be part of it. How does all of this wrap up? Like, what does it all coalesce into?
So great question, right? So that's accurate. It's a good way to synthesize, right? The process here is you start with an open, curious mind, asking genuinely open-ended questions like, how does this
Mm-hmm.
work? Why do you do it this way? I'm not accusing you. I really just want to
That's a good
understand.
point. Yeah.
Right? And then you're going to get a bunch of data. Now you're looking for patterns and you're looking for comparing it to how things should be. You as the owner, you probably have an idea of how it should be. If
Mm-hmm.
not, now you should think about it. Well, I
Mm-hmm.
heard how my employee one does it, and employee number two does it, employee number three. What do I think is best?
Mm-hmm.
Right? What costs me money or what costs me management attention? Right? So now you've got all this body of data, and now you're probably in that, and throughout the process, you will start to get ideas about, all right, it
Mm-hmm.
seems like this is where the breakdown is happening. There's probably a breakdown in communication or a
Usually.
breakdown in execution somewhere.
Yeah.
And those two things are the heart of all problems.
Because of communication. Execution breaks down because of communication.
There you go. And the communication might break down because someone assumes that something's supposed to be, the world is the way it is, and somebody else assumes the world is a different way. And you haven't talked about the fact that we're both assuming different facts onto the same scenario, right? So the super simple coffee shop example is like, hey, at the end of the shift change, certain things are supposed to happen between the 3 o'clock and the 4 o'clock people, but they don't always happen that way. And the 4 o'clock person doesn't even know because they've only ever worked the afternoon shift, and they don't know what opening looks like. And so they don't realize that they've left 45 minutes worth of work for the opening person in the morning because they just don't know.
Then it goes back to role description, because in your role description, if you knew that at the end of a shift, you have to fill out this checklist, then the checklist will get done, which will make the handoff. So you know what your role is, that's part of it. It's going to get done because it's part of your role.
That's
so
right.
There's lots of things that are going to come to.
That's exactly right, Lee. And so here's the extra layer of complexity that can happen there is that you might have that checklist, and you might have basically someone who's like, I don't like doing the last two items on the checklist because they're dirty and it's smelly.
I just don't want to do it.
I have to go to the back and take the garbage out, and there's always dark and scary, so I just don't do it.
Yeah.
Right. And so there might be a difficult conversation that needs to happen, which is now the owner or the manager has to say, look, I've noticed that you're not doing the last two steps on the checklist. That's not okay. Right. Maybe their reason is valid. They're the only person closing the shop at the end of the day, and the dark alley where you have to throw the trash out is scary, and they don't feel safe. And so, but if you don't have that conversation, you don't know. Mm-hmm. So now you can talk about solutions. Do I need to put a light outside? Mm-hmm. Do I need to, have a protocol where you ask the neighboring business to walk outside with you and throw the trash out? And it literally takes 60 seconds and some politeness.
Yeah.
Right. But until so if the manager's avoiding that difficult conversation because they don't want to deliver the negative feedback, which is you're not doing the last two things on the step, last two steps on the process, and that conversation never gets had, it might be that every day now, the next morning, the person who opens has to take the trash out and do X, Y, Z, and they're 20 minutes behind getting the coffee started and getting the stuff out of the fridge and setting up the milk bar. And the first customers that come in are always a little rushed, and your morning rush.
So it impacts revenue, it impacts the culture, it impacts everything.
Exactly. And really, like you said, lastly, the culture. It might be that the morning folks are just grumpy because they always have to do this, and they think that they shouldn't be. And you just don't know it, and that's why you get complaints. Mm-hmm. And so unless you drill down to the who's taking the trash out basic level detail, you don't know, and you're sitting with my labor cost is too high, and I think I need to cut staff.
Yeah.
And the real
That's not,
solution is the real solution
yep.
is you need to have a couple uncomfortable conversations with two employees, get to
About
the
taking
crux
the
of the
trash out.
issue,
Yeah.
and you've solved it. And now everyone's happy and everyone's dancing in the shop and
Yeah.
customers are tipping extra and everybody's happy now. And it wasn't
Yeah.
and that was what was going on.
That's awesome. That's a perfect way to wrap this up too. I mean, I think that's the whole kind of audit in a nutshell. So thanks for that. Thanks for being on. This has been an awesome conversation.
Fantastic. I'm happy to be here. Hope folks take something away, and I can be more helpful on a lot of other topics than just coffee shop operations.
Yeah, that's right.
Please reach out.
Well, definitely. And you're clearly passionate about what you do. You obviously have a lot of knowledge about it. So, and we want to send people your way. Where do we send them?
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Lee. You guys can find me on LinkedIn. My name is Ryan Drake Lee. Please search for me and send me a line. Reach out that way. We can set up a consultation and explore what you're facing. Or you can find me at RDL Consulting LLC.com. So RDL Consulting LLC.com. Shoot me an email. Follow me on LinkedIn or Instagram.
Yeah.
I share, wise tidbits about challenges facing first-time business buyers and first-time business sellers.
That's a big one.
And generally my perspectives about macro and microeconomic issues in the U.S. Across a variety of topics. So I'm a business and econ nerd. I share my nerdiness with the world, and looking forward to helping you.
Well, you have a home here.
Excellent.
Thanks again, and we'll have to have you back.
All right, Lee, I appreciate it. Talk soon.